Hello everyone, my name is Wayne Jones. I'm the University Librarian here at Carleton, and we're here for another installment of the series we're doing called Tell Me About Yourself, which is a way for staff to get to know other staff, and frankly for me to get to know other staff at a little more level of detail as well. I'm here today with Ryan Tucci, who's he's a reserves technician down in Access Services. Tell me a little bit about, you already said a little bit about what you do, but in a nutshell, what is reserves work?
So reserves work is it's a really rewarding thing to do. So what we do is we actually get professor syllabuses and we actually work through them and make sure that the readings that the professors want students have access to through a system we call ARIES. With copyright laws, sometimes that will not allow us to make those readings available electronically, so what we'll do is we'll put them on physical reserve, short-term loan, usually a 2 or a 4 hour loan, and allow students to come to that reserves desk and actually check that material out for a short-term loan.
Right. Yeah. So I'll ask you, and some of these you may not be able to tell, but some of these will be dumb questions on my part, but I'm going to ask them anyway. Why is it that we don't just go buy all the materials? Like, why is it that we have to rely on making copies and getting copyright clearance? Why don't we just buy the books or get the subscriptions?
Okay, so that's a really good question actually. So in some cases we actually do own the books, but what the professor will ask sometimes is that they want all the readings available electronically. So in that case, even if we do own the book, we do make digital copies if it allows through copyright. We do have to really watch copyright requirements, but what we will do is actually, if we can clear them through copyright, we'll actually make those readings available electronically, just because it makes it easier for students to access those things. Instead of having to come in physically to the library, they just log on to ARIES and they can get their readings that way. In terms of subscriptions, a lot of the times we do already own a lot of the material that professors want students to have access to, so all we're doing is actually just making a direct link. So once they log into ARIES, they can actually just access the material through what's called a permanent link. When they're off campus, they can just click that link and it'll take them right into our databases. So in a lot of cases, we do already own a lot of those journal subscriptions and journal articles. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and obviously from the point of view of the student or for the faculty member to a certain extent, makes it very seamless, right? You just sort of, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's gone on in the back end to make that possible there, but they just, from their point of view, they just go in, pick up their readings, and they're good to go, right?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I think we pride ourselves in reserves is the prof will come to the desk and just say, here's my syllabus, is there anything I need to do? And essentially, not really. We'll take it from there, we'll go through the syllabus, we'll look at it, we'll contact you if there's any questions, but largely it's just a very simple process. From the faculty perspective, we have a little bit more detail that we have to go into the back, but it is a lot of work in the fall and in the winter terms especially, with the volume of requests we're receiving, but from their perspective, we want to make it as easy for them to get that material to the students as well. Right. But on our end, there is a little bit more that goes on in the back that makes it quite a bit more complicated, but for them, we want to make it as seamless as possible.
I remember my days in university back in the 18th century or whenever it was I was studying, but there was something called course packs where you would, I believe you had to pay for it even, where you would go and the professor had designed this little package which would have all your readings in it. Is this the substitute for that, or is this something more than that?
So that's a really good question too, because some faculty here at Carleton will still use course packs, and I'm familiar with course packs as well, but the problem with the course packs is, I don't know if you remember, like when you do the photocopies, they're really not that easy to read, they're really low quality. One of the things that we do in reserves is we'll make sure that it's a very clean copy, and that's for a few different reasons. What we'll do is we'll make them a clean copy just to make it readable for students, but it's, a bigger issue right now is the accessibility issue. So we'll actually go in and erase highlighting, or erase the underlining and things, just to make it more accessible for students when we go ahead and use, it's called OCR, ocular character recognition, so that it's usable by students who are using adaptive technology, so that they can use it on their software that reads to them. So that's a really big thing right now.
Right.
But there are still some faculty who do use course packs, but this is essentially a very similar thing. And if we're already subscribing to this material in the library collection, it doesn't make sense for students to have to go out and buy a course pack if we already have access to that.
Right.
Yeah, it's a really good program.
Yeah. What kind of take-up do we have? By take-up, I mean, are all faculty members who have courses that have reserves, are 100% of them coming to us, or not?
I'm not sure what the actual number is, but I think there's a lot of faculty that, as they learn about the service, they come back to us year after year. I'm not sure the actual number of faculty that are using reserves, but it seems pretty high. The people that come to us the first time, what's really interesting for me is watching that trust grow, because they do all this work to build their course, and then when they come into the library and just say, here's my course syllabus, is there anything I need to do? And we say, no, we'll take that and we'll work on that. They're a little, I think, maybe reluctant's not the right word, but they're a little bit worried about maybe handing that over, or a little skeptical that we can do the work.
Right.
But we go ahead and do everything for them, and get it up and make it readable for the students. And I think that is where we win the faculty over, and it's really interesting to watch that trust grow.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would presume that 1 year when you do that, and the faculty member is super pleased with it, you basically got a convert for forever. Then on
It
that,
seems like that, yeah, absolutely. I think the ones that use our service, like, they keep coming back and using it. Yeah, absolutely.
I know it's a busy service because just from the position that I occupy, and over the course of let's say the last 3 or 4 years, we've made requests for increased staffing and increased money for copyright clearance and stuff like that, because we realize that there has been a shift happening, maybe still a shift happening, where this is a very popular service, not only at Carleton, but this is what academic libraries do now. Has that been your experience, that it's basically just something that's ramping up rather than something that's sort of leveled out?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's really picking up. I had a faculty member last term come to me who's from architecture, I believe, and they used to do work in the States through universities, and they haven't seen a service like that down there, at least at the universities or the institutions that they worked at. So coming here, I think it's going to be something that a lot of faculty really do adopt going forward. And as more contract instructors and full-time faculty come in, as they learn about the service, I think they're going to be really pleased with what we do down there.
Right, no doubt.
And I think we'll just keep going and keep ramping up from there.
Tell me a little bit about it. I'm curious, I know a little bit about this, but not the intricacies of, you were already talking about copyright clearance. So this would be a case where there's something that a faculty member wants on his or her list that we don't possess. So what goes on there?
The process, if we don't own the item or have access to the item?
Right.
So there's a couple different things we can do. We'll educate the faculty member just about what we can do within copyright. There are a lot of details that we kind of cover with them. So we first explain that. Then what we'll do is we'll see how much of the item they need available for students. So like I said earlier in the intro video, this is very simplified, but 10% or 1 chapter, whichever is greater. And if it does exceed that, what we'll do is we'll see if we can clear it through copyright, through the Copyright Clearance Center, or through the publisher directly. If that's not the case, then what we'll do is we'll look at purchasing a physical copy to go on reserve, so at least we have a copy of that. It doesn't help necessarily for access to the material, because a lot of students want to access that online, but at least then we can get the material to the student, which is,
Sorry to interrupt, but tell me a little bit what you mean by, you said clear it through copyright clearance, or clear it through the publisher.
Absolutely.
What do you mean by that?
So what we'll do is, if it exceeds what we can do through fair dealing, and fair dealing is that kind of rule where it's 10% or 1 chapter, what we'll do is we'll actually approach the publisher directly or through the Copyright Clearance Center, which is built into areas. So if we go through the Copyright Clearance Center, we'll put the request forward to them and see if it's something that they can clear for us, meaning they'll grant us use for the term. And there's all kinds of requirements for that. They'll look at the number of students in the course, the dates that it's being offered, things like that.
Right.
Yeah, so we'll go through there, or we'll actually contact the publishers directly, where we provide them similar information, and then they'll make a judgment whether they'll let us do it for a fee, or if we have to go another route with that. And that's where we would go, putting the physical item on reserve.
Has that been pretty, our publishers or the CCC pretty responsive? Because, I can just imagine, I guess, if you're contacting, I presume, by email.
Yeah, so if we go through areas, it actually does generate an email that goes to the publisher.
So
Yeah,
I guess
the rights holder.
I guess what I'm getting at is that do you have to chase that down, or do you get a pretty quick response, or does it vary, or?
It varies, actually. It's funny, some of the bigger publishers I actually find personally when I'm going in to find who to contact for copyright. Sometimes it's a little more difficult than some of those smaller publishers who just have a single email address.
Right.
And I find it just depends on which publisher you're going with. Some are really, really good with responding to us. Some are maybe a little less responsive, but it depends on the publisher.
So could a possible outcome be, let's say it's a publisher that for whatever a large publisher that for whatever reason doesn't get back to you, and suddenly we're at the first week of classes. How does that work with the reserves package that the faculty member wants to put up? Can she not use that then, or how does that go?
So we have a few different things we can do. We'll either rush purchase the item to get put on physically. At least then we have access to the textbook or the book that they need. That's one option. The thing is, there's all kinds of different things we can do for that. Another option would be to ask the professor if they have a copy of the item, and what we would do is we would put it on as a professor's copy. If that's the case, we'll take the book, process it, we'll do a little brief cataloging session, we'll go ahead and put in the basic information for the book, catalog it, wrap it in a cover just to protect it a little better, and put it on reserve that way. So we do have options available. We do have options available, or we'll go ahead and do that interlibrary loan, but again, that does require, we do comply with copyright when we're doing that. So if it does exceed that, what we can do with copyright, then we kind of have to do it on a case-by-case basis.
All of those sound like kind of last resorts, and I'm hoping that, maybe I'll just ask the question, like, is it a large percentage? Is that a small percentage of what you need to do? Are the last resorts a small percentage, or is that 30% of what you need to do?
It does depend on what course we're working on, but we do let professors know when we're in the busy time, we'll try to get things done as soon as possible. Usually they're very receptive to that, but we'll go week to week. So we do try to get material up sooner rather than later. So that's one way we can kind of combat that last minute stuff.
Right.
But no, I think in a lot of cases we're able to get the material pretty quickly, unless it's like an obscure publisher and we can make that stuff available relatively quickly. We do work closely with the reserves coordinator when kind of a special case comes up and we do have to make some like rush requests or something. We'll speak with the reserve coordinator, so we do go to them for that level of request.
Okay, that's very interesting. I mean, that's such what I like about it, and perhaps what I could see that people might enjoy in it, it's such a direct service to both faculty and students. Like, if there's no kind of intermediary there. We want this thing, here's this thing.
So we do a lot of that legwork. In some cases, we will go back to the faculty and say, do you have a copy of this? Just maybe it's something that's out of publication and we can't access it. We'll work very closely in that case, but it's not a large percentage that are like that. A lot of them are very.
So just to switch a little, how did you end up in this job? Yeah, I know I'm confident this is not your first job here in Carleton. Well, certainly not here in the library. Maybe you've worked at other jobs at Carleton as well. What's your background about how you are where you are?
Okay, so actually that's a good question. So when I came to university, I actually started here at Carleton. So I started my undergrad here. I did my undergrad in history and communication studies. My Bachelor of Arts was in history with my minor in communications. Then what I did was I graduated, and I was actually working here in the library on an assignment, and I was like, I think I could do this. I think I could work in the library. I like researching, things like that. So I went over and did my 2-year Algonquin diploma for the technician.
Right.
At the end of that degree, I did my placement here at Carleton, and I planned that purposely just to keep me fresh in people's mind. So I left from my co-op and did a brief stint doing some cataloging of some construction documents at Algonquin College, and found out that they were opening up a term or a contract position in reserves. So I applied for that because copyright's always been something that really interests me, and I remember when Carleton actually backed out of the Access Copyright Agreement, when that all went down, and I was really happy with Carleton's decision to do that because they weren't willing to pass the buck to students. And that was really important to me as a former student at Carleton. I thought that was a really good stand. They were going to go with fair dealing and directly to the publishers to take care of all the copyright. So that was a big thing when I came in for my interview, and I talked about that. So I started actually in reserves, but then I got a full-time permanent position in reference services.
Right.
Yeah, so then I went over there and I spent about 2.5 to 3 years there before, and as you said earlier, it was ramping up. We got more positions in reserves. Then I applied for that position, and now I moved back into reserves. Yeah.
And now you also, though, have your librarian degree as well.
That's correct. Yeah. So I actually have my librarian degree, and I remember when I interviewed for my position doing the internship or the co-op program. Jill asked me why I went with the tech as opposed to the master's degree, and I thought it was really important to get that technician degree so that you know what work you're doing or what the work that the support staff are doing, so that when you do make that kind of jump into the next level, you know what decisions you're making at that next level and how it affects the work that you're doing on the ground. I think that's really important. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. What are some? I'm curious too. When I went to library school, it was back in a long time ago, but yours is fairly recent. I'm curious about, and I don't mean to out the library or any sort of anything negative particularly, but the sort of things you were learning there in library school, which would have been a couple years ago, in contrast to, or maybe in complement to what we currently do here, or something that surprised you that this was a big movement that you studied a lot about, but we don't do here, that sort of thing.
So I did my my MLIS online, and one of the things I learned that San Jose was really good at doing online content and being able to distribute that to the students. And I think that's something that the library needs to look at, I think, a little bit, and how we present our programming, things like that. I think that's really important. But in terms of what we were learning in the program, I think it was really applicable to what we're doing here. I didn't see anything. I found the degree really well laid out, and I was able to apply what I learned in that program to this library directly. It was really good.
Yeah. I'm curious about one thing that's sort of a side note to that. One of the big impetuses here at Carleton University, apart from the library, is online courses generally, which a lot of, if not all of what you experienced in your degree was online courses, right?
100%, yeah, it was 100% online.
What was your experience of that as a pedagogical method, if I could use a fancy term like that? Yeah.
I actually felt, so what I was a little worried about going into that online program, so I did that while working here full time. So I'd go home at the end of the day and I'd start doing schoolwork. So I turned from library worker to student at night. But what I thought about it was, I thought I felt more connected online, which is a really strange thing. I was a little worried about it going into it, but I actually felt more connected in an online environment than I did when I actually attended like my undergrad here. It was a really strange feeling, but I think that the technology's gotten to that point where it allows you to feel more connected.
Just say one aspect of that, like what you mean by that.
What I mean by that? Just the tools that they have in place to collaborate with other students were really well laid out, because they use, I believe it was Collaborate at the time. I don't remember the actual software they used, but it was really good. It's similar to our Blackboard or our CUlearn.
Right, sure.
Yeah, and it was a really good platform that they used, and it really was very versatile and really geared towards student learning and collaboration. I thought it was wonderful.
That's very encouraging for the future, because I mean I definitely would never denigrate the faculty member at the front of a classroom and teaching, and of course there's benefits of that as well, many benefits, and there's a gigantic history of that, of centuries of people doing that. But it's encouraging that your experience is not seen as sort of a, well, I managed to get through it, but there were so many disadvantages, but you actually talked about increased connection. That's encouraging.
Yeah, it's really good, and I was a little bit worried about going into it as an online program. You know how people, I don't know, there seems to be this kind of stigma that online is maybe not as engaging, or I don't know what people are saying, but it was really connected, and I thought I learned a lot, and I thought it was a really great experience being in that online. It forced me to be more critical about my time management as well. And I definitely think that was a really big thing I take away from that.
Yeah, I find that really highly encouraging. We're really glad to hear that. That's a very high note to end this interview on. Thanks for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
I really enjoyed myself.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.